about their investigation into the deaths of the actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa.
Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were discovered dead in their Santa Fe home under circumstances that immediately raised profound concerns and unanswered questions.
They say he died from heart disease after his wife passed away from a rare infectious illness.
The discovery came after a period of eerie silence in a once lively Amti residence, where everyday signs of life had gradually faded away. Neighbours began to notice small disquieting details: a door left slightly ajar, a mounting pile of undisturbed mail, and an overall ambience of abandonment that defied the routine flow of life. The home, which once resonated with activity and warmth, now exuded an unsettling stillness, suggesting that something had gone drastically wrong. Local authorities were eventually alerted by a concerned individual who sensed that the prolonged quiet was far from normal, prompting an investigation into a scene that would soon reveal far more than a simple case of unattended deaths. Each element of the scene, the meticulous arrangement of personal belongings, the stagnant air that filled the rooms, and the subtle signs that life had been deliberately halted, served as clues pointing to a deliberate concealment of events, rather than a natural, unnoticed passing. The detailed examination of the environment raised the possibility that the timing of the deaths was intentionally obscured, creating a timeline that would later prove to be critical in understanding the full extent of the situation. Every facet of this initial discovery played a significant role in building the mystery, compelling investigators and the public alike to question whether the deaths were the result of an unavoidable natural process or a meticulously planned operation that allowed such a notable pair to remain undiscovered for so long. The details of the scene inside the home reveal a perplexing picture that defies conventional expectations of a typical passing. Upon entering the residence, law enforcement encountered a setting that, while orderly on the surface, contained numerous subtle hints that all was not as it seemed. Gene Hackman was found in the kitchen area, his body positioned in an unnatural manner with his glasses left aside, as though he had been abruptly interrupted in his final moments. In another part of the home, Betsy Arakawa's body was discovered, in the bathroom where everyday items, pills scattered across the counter, and the dried remnants of water on the sink, spoke to a routine abruptly abandoned. The absence of any signs of struggle, forced entry, or physical altercation was particularly striking. There were no marks of violence, no broken objects, and no indications that a confrontation had taken place. Furthermore, the presence of two dogs, one roaming freely and the other confined to a crate, added another layer of mystery to the circumstances, highlighting an unusual disconnect between the scene and any expected reaction to a crisis. Every physical detail, from the static condition of household items to the stark contrast between the bodies and their surroundings, created an image that was as methodical as it was macabre. The careful, almost clinical arrangement of each element pointed to a situation where time appeared to have frozen, prompting an inquiry into whether these conditions were naturally occurring or had been the result of deliberate intervention designed to obscure the true sequence of events. A significant turning point in understanding the case emerged from the careful analysis of digital evidence, which began to rewrite the timeline of the events. Among the key findings was the information recorded by Gene Hackman's pacemaker, a device that provided precise data about the exact moment his heart ceased beating, an event dated around February 17th. This crucial piece of information directly challenged initial assumptions about the natural progression of his death. Alongside the pacemaker data, investigators unearthed additional digital traces, such as security camera footage and cell tower records, that indicated unusual activity near the residence in the days leading up to the discovery. The digital logs revealed patterns of movement and communication that suggested someone had been in the vicinity of the house before law enforcement arrived. GPS data and other technological records further corroborated this timeline, adding layers of complexity to the case. These detailed findings not only provided a more accurate account of when the final moments occurred, but also pointed to the possibility that the sequence of events was influenced by an external party. The convergence of pacemaker data and digital footprints created a narrative where every electronic trace was a testament to an intervention that defied the initial assumptions of a simple, natural demise. The alignment of these multiple streams of evidence underscored the idea that the apparent stillness of the home belied an intricate web of digital interactions that had carefully redefined the timeline of death, ultimately prompting a deeper investigation into who might have been orchestrating events behind the scenes. The investigation took a decisive turn when attention shifted to Gene Hackman's daughter, Leslie Anne Hackman, whose involvement in the events surrounding her father's death began to emerge through a series of conflicting accounts and digital discrepancies. Records showed that she had claimed to have spoken with her father a few weeks before his death, yet phone logs and communication data painted a very different picture, with her last recorded contact occurring much earlier than she had stated. This gap between her account and the digital evidence served as a critical red flag, casting doubt on the authenticity of her story. Moreover, a thorough review of her financial activities revealed that her bank transactions and estate-related discussions had taken place well before any official announcement of her father's passing. These financial maneuvers were not random. They appeared to be part of a broader, calculated strategy to secure a more favourable position regarding her father's substantial estate. The detailed examination of her phone records, emails, and bank statements not only underscored inconsistencies, but also hinted at premeditation. The alignment of these digital footprints with the timeline of the event suggested that she may have been privy to information that others were not, positioning her as a central figure in a complex web of deceit. The careful analysis of these anomalies, from the timing of her last communication to her proactive financial transactions, created an undeniable narrative that her actions were both suspicious and deeply intertwined with the unfolding tragedy, ultimately transforming the case from a straightforward account of untimely deaths into a labyrinth of intentional manipulation and pre-planned estate maneuvers. An in-depth examination of financial transactions provided further compelling evidence that linked Leslie Anne Hackman to a series of premeditated maneuvers intended to secure her inheritance. Detailed reviews of her bank records revealed a pattern of transactions that were both unusually timed and meticulously executed, occurring well before any public acknowledgement of her father's death. These financial activities, which included small untraceable transfers and discrete movements of cash, appeared designed to create a digital footprint that subtly manipulated the flow of assets. Every transaction was scrutinized for its timing and intent, with the data suggesting that these moves were part of a calculated effort to influence the eventual distribution of her father's considerable wealth. The records pointed to a deliberate strategy wherein each monetary transfer, no matter how minor, played a role in a larger scheme to secure a disproportionate share of the estate. The alignment of these financial patterns with the timeline of her father's demise raised suspicions about her motives, painting a picture of someone who was not merely reacting to an unforeseen tragedy, but actively planning for it. The precise nature of these transactions, combined with the early engagement in estate-related discussions, reinforced the notion that her involvement was far from coincidental. Instead, every digital trace, every discrete movement of money, was meticulously orchestrated to ensure that she would benefit from a fortune that had been built over decades, thereby casting her actions in the light of intentional manipulation rather than mere misfortune. A critical piece of the puzzle emerged from the examination of legal documents connected to Gene Hackman's estate, which revealed alarming signs of tampering and alteration prior to his official death. Investigations uncovered that important pages within Hackman's will had been left blank or had been surreptitiously modified, a discovery that immediately cast doubt on the integrity of the document. These alterations were not random errors or innocent oversights. Rather, they appeared to be part of a deliberate effort to reassign the distribution of assets in a way that would disproportionately benefit certain parties. Detailed forensic analysis of the paper trail revealed that these modifications had been made well before any public confirmation of Hackman's death, suggesting that someone had taken proactive measures to secure control over his estate. The .eerie evidence clearly pointed to the presence of external interference in the legal documentation process, with Leslie Anne Hackman's name repeatedly emerging in connection with the suspicious changes. The altered documents, when scrutinised alongside digital records and bank transactions, painted a disturbing picture of calculated legal manipulation. Each revision, each blank space where vital information should have been recorded, contributed to a growing narrative of deliberate fraud and deceit. The systematic nature of these modifications underscored a pre-planned strategy that not only sought to undermine the integrity of the legal process, but also to secure a larger share of the vast wealth that Gene Hackman had accumulated over the years. The tampering of these documents became a critical piece of evidence in building a case that was as much about financial ambition as it was about the tragic loss of a renowned figure, and it fundamentally altered the course of the investigation. The investigation further delved into a perplexing anomaly regarding the critical medications that Gene Hackman relied upon to manage his chronic heart condition. Given his documented history of heart issues, it was expected that the home would contain an ample supply of life-sustaining medications. However, upon inspection, investigators were met with an alarming discovery. The medications were conspicuously missing. The usual stock of pills and refills, which would normally be replenished regularly, had inexplicably vanished, leaving behind only empty bottles and a disturbing silence that hinted at more than mere forgetfulness. This absence was not viewed as an innocent oversight, but rather as a potential sign of deliberate intervention where the necessary medical supplies had been intentionally withheld. The lack of these vital medications raised immediate concerns about whether Hackman had been deprived of the treatment essential for managing his deteriorating health. Every detail of this omission, the empty pill bottles, the unfilled prescriptions, and the overall discrepancy between expected and actual medical inventory, pointed to a scenario in which his ability to maintain his health was actively sabotaged. Such a deliberate withholding of medicine would have had a profound impact on his condition, gradually accelerating his decline without triggering the typical alarms of an overt medical emergency. The detailed investigation into this missing element of his care thus became a crucial factor, suggesting that his death may not have been the natural consequence of his existing health issues, but rather the result of a calculated, sinister effort to deprive him of the means to recover, thereby altering the expected course of his final days. Examinations conducted as part of the autopsy and toxicology investigations introduced further layers of complexity to the case, as both reports failed to provide a clear cause of death for either Gene Hackman or Betsy Arakawa. The detailed medical evaluations revealed that Hackman's body, despite the evident signs of decay, showed no indications of external trauma, such as bruises, fractures, or defensive wounds that would have been expected if there had been any form of struggle or violent encounter. Similarly, the physical condition of Betsy Arakawa's body was found to be unmarked by any significant injuries or signs of forceful intervention. Toxicological analyses, which were expected to detect traces of overdoses, poisoning, or harmful substances like carbon monoxide, returned results that were surprisingly clean and inconclusive. There were no detectable levels of drugs, toxins, or any chemical agents that could have plausibly explained a sudden or precipitous decline in health. The absence of forensic evidence that typically accompanies cases of homicide or accidental poisoning shifted the focus towards more insidious possibilities, such as the deliberate withholding of essential care or medication. Every element of the medical findings, from the unblemished state of the bodies to the lack of chemical signatures, posed challenging questions about how two individuals could pass away without any clear external cause. This absence of obvious forensic markers forced investigators to consider alternative explanations that might account for the seemingly natural yet unnervingly silent passing of two prominent figures, ultimately deepening the mystery rather than resolving it. The culmination of the investigation led to a dramatic legal reckoning for Leslie Anne Hackman, whose actions were scrutinized and ultimately judged under the weight of compelling evidence. The comprehensive inquiry revealed that her involvement was not limited to inconsistent communication or suspicious financial transactions. It extended to a series of calculated maneuvers that encompassed tampered legal documents, covert estate planning, and deliberate financial mismanagement. Court proceedings meticulously presented evidence gathered from a variety of sources, including detailed digital records, altered paperwork, and untraceable money transfers. Each piece of evidence was carefully pieced together to construct a timeline that unequivocally demonstrated premeditation. It became apparent that, well before any official confirmation of her father's death, actions were taken to manipulate legal and financial records in her favour. The documentation showed that changes had been made to her father's will, key financial transactions had been conducted, and communications that should have been present were conspicuously missing. This systematic pattern of behaviour built an undeniable case that pointed to her intentional interference in matters that directly affected the distribution of a substantial estate. The legal process, conducted with precision and rigour, resulted in her being charged with multiple counts of theft, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The verdict stripped her of all rights to her father's wealth and legacy, marking a decisive moment in a case that had evolved far beyond a simple family tragedy. Every aspect of the evidence contributed to a narrative of deliberate greed and calculated deception, ensuring that justice was served and leaving a lasting imprint on the legacy of a once revered figure. Despite the conclusive legal outcome, many questions remain unanswered, leaving behind a lingering aura of mystery that challenges the complete understanding of the tragic events surrounding Gene Hackman's final days. Although the investigation and subsequent legal proceedings provided extensive evidence of deliberate manipulation and fraudulent actions, the full truth behind the events remains shrouded in ambiguity. The digital footprints, tampered legal documents, and missing medications all contribute to an overarching narrative of calculated deceit and premeditated interference that goes far beyond a simple accident. Every piece of evidence points to a meticulously orchestrated plan designed to not only secure financial gain, but also to obscure the true circumstances of the deaths. The timing of every action, from the precise moment captured by the pacemaker to the covert financial transactions and the silent tampering of estate documents, suggests a complex and intertwined web of motives and actions. While the court's verdict brought legal closure by stripping Leslie Anne Hackman of her inheritance and imposing severe penalties for her actions, it also left open a number of critical questions about the broader implications of the case. Was this an isolated instance of familial betrayal, or does it hint at a more pervasive culture of manipulation and greed in matters of inheritance? The unresolved aspects of the timeline and the subtle hints left in the digital and physical evidence continue to invite scrutiny, prompting ongoing debate and reflection among those who have followed the case. In the end, while justice may have been legally served, the enduring mystery of how such a high-profile case could unfold in this manner leaves a legacy of unanswered questions and a haunting reminder that sometimes, even the most thoroughly investigated events can retain an element of the inexplicable.